In the heart of a once bustling city, now slowly being reclaimed by nature, there was a forgotten place. It wasn't an oasis, nor a paradise. It was a wasteland. A space that had been scarred by human hands. Derelict buildings, abandoned factories, and twisted metal were scattered across the land. But over time, cracks formed in the concrete. Roots found their way through the pavement, and a wild sense of rebirth took hold. This was not the orderly beauty of a forest or a pristine marsh. It was the wild, untamed resilience of nature that slowly clawed back from the destruction. Amidst this urban jungle, a kestrel had made its home. It was a solitary creature, one that had learned to thrive in the spaces humans left behind. Its talons gripped the rusted beams of an old factory as it surveyed its domain. The air, thick with the scent of moss, dust, and decay, swirled around the bird, a reminder of how the world had shifted. The kestrel was not the only one who had adapted, though there were other creatures, small mammals that had found solace in the dereliction. Birds that had nested in broken windows, and the occasional fox or raccoon that ventured from the shadows. But the kestrel's world was one of high tension. The factory grounds were vast, a tangle of broken concrete, metal, and empty spaces, but it was never truly quiet. There was the distant hum of the city, a low, constant reminder of human civilization, but there were other sounds too. The sound of something stirring in the dark, a rustle in the underbrush, the quickened flapping of wings that sent a thrill of recognition through the kestrel's heart. It was always hunting, always on alert. There was prey to be caught, but there were predators here too. As dusk fell, the shadows deepened, and the kestrel's sharp eyes pierced the dimming light. It was a creature of precision and patience, its every movement deliberate. It perched on a metal girder, its feathers sleek and ruffled in the evening wind. Its sharp gaze swept across the factory grounds, studying the movements of the rats, the small mammals, and the birds that dared to fly low. The kestrel had learned this place. The corners where the rats scurried, the hollowed-out buildings where the sound of a distant siren pierced the air, a brief but sharp reminder of the world beyond. The kestrel ignored it. It had heard the sirens many times, and it had learned to distinguish the noise from the real threats. It was the presence of another bird, a larger bird, one that moved with an unsettling ease, that had the kestrel's attention now. The kestrel fluffed its feathers, adjusting its stance, ready to take flight at the slightest sign of danger. The air was suddenly charged with a quiet tension as the larger bird, a hawk perhaps, it was gliding low, its wings outstretched like the shadow of a predator. The kestrel's chest tightened, its heartbeat quickened. The battle for territory was always unspoken, but fierce. The kestrel had fought its fair share of battles before, but the hawk was different. The kestrel was small, agile, a hunter of speed. The hawk was strong, ruthless, and relentless. It had the advantage of size, and it was a force that could not be ignored. The kestrel hesitated, watching as the hawk drew closer, its silhouette dark against the fading light of the sky. For a moment, they were locked in a silent standoff, each bird aware of the other's presence. The air felt thick now, as if holding its breath. The kestrel could feel the weight of the hawk's gaze, as if it was already calculating its move. Then, without warning, the hawk dived. The kestrel reacted immediately, its wings snapping into motion as it shot upward into the sky. The hawk's talons swiped through the air just inches away from its target. The chase had begun. The kestrel's wings beat faster, cutting through the air with a rhythm known only to creatures born of the wind. The hawk was gaining, but the kestrel was faster, more agile, more unpredictable. It darted between the broken buildings, using the shadows to its advantage, weaving in and out of the wreckage like a shadow itself. But the hawk was relentless. The kestrel could hear the rush of its wings behind it, the deep, steady beat of a predator that would not give up easily. The chase took them higher into the sky, the city sprawling beneath them, a tangle of streets and buildings that had once been a place of human life, but were now silent witnesses to the struggle below. The Kestrel flapped harder, its muscles burning, but the hawk was right there, closing the gap. It was then that the Kestrel made a sudden, sharp turn, a maneuver that left the hawk struggling to follow. For a split second, the hawk faltered, its focus broken. The Kestrel seized the opportunity, diving straight down toward the factory grounds. The hawk followed, but it was too late. The Kestrel knew the terrain better. It swooped low, disappearing into the ruins, where the hawk's larger frame could not maneuver. The Kestrel vanished into the shadows. For a moment there was nothing but the sound of the wind and the distant hum of the city. The hawk's wings beat in frustration, but it did not follow. The Kestrel's chest heaved with exertion, its sharp eyes scanning the dark for any signs of movement. The tension in the air had shifted. As the hawk disappeared into the fading light, the Kestrel perched once more on a high beam, surveying its reclaimed territory. Its wings still trembled from the chase, but its mind was calm. It had one. For now, the factory grounds, scarred as they were its domain. It was a place where survival had become an art, and the Kestrel had learned to navigate it with deadly precision. But there was more at play than just the hunt. The world beyond this urban wilderness was changing, growing, evolving in ways that the Kestrel could not understand. There were more creatures in the shadows now, creatures that had adapted, like the Kestrel, to the city's constant rebirth. And somewhere, hidden in the depths of this reclaimed land, there was a secret, something the Kestrel had yet to uncover. It was a mystery that could change everything. And as the sun sank beneath the horizon, the Kestrel felt it, the pull of something deeper, something unknown, something waiting in the dark. And so, with the night settling over the factory grounds, the Kestrel spread its wings once more, preparing for whatever came next. Its resilience was its strength, but even it knew that survival was never guaranteed. As night fell fully upon the factory grounds, the atmosphere shifted. The shadows deepened, and the temperature dropped, bringing with it the promise of something unknown. The Kestrel remained perched atop the rusted metal beam, eyes scanning the wreckage below. It had seen this place change over the years, but tonight felt different. The silence hung heavy, as though the very air had paused in anticipation. The Kestrel's keen ears picked up the slightest of movements. A soft rustling. Its feathers puffed up instinctively, every muscle taut, ready to spring into action. It had learned to trust these instincts. They were often the difference between survival and failure. The wind whispered through the gaps in the broken windows of the old factory, carrying with it a faint scent. The Kestrel turned its head, focused now on a darkened alleyway at the far side of the grounds. There, barely visible against the backdrop of the dilapidated buildings, was a flicker of movement, a flash of fur, then nothing. The Kestrel's eyes narrowed, tracking the faint sound of footsteps, deliberate, slow, almost too careful. In the distance, a fox emerged, its body sleek and low to the ground as it slinked through the wreckage. The Kestrel knew this fox. It had seen it before, roaming the abandoned streets, foraging through the debris. But tonight, the fox was moving with purpose, its eyes locked on something further ahead, something the Kestrel could not yet see. The Kestrel tilted its head, watching as the fox stopped at the edge of a collapsed building, its body tense. Its nose twitched as it sniffed the air, its ears swiveling in every direction. Then, without warning, the fox bolted forward, darting into the underbrush with surprising speed. The Kestrel's heart raced as it instinctively followed the fox's path, its sharp eyes now scanning the ground below for any sign of what had prompted the fox's sudden movement. A cold shiver ran down its spine as the Kestrel saw it. A glint in the moonlight, a flash of silver. There, half hidden beneath a pile of broken concrete, was something the Kestrel hadn't expected. It wasn't just any animal. It was a creature it had never seen before, but one that carried a presence all its own. Its body was long and sinuous, like a shadow stretching across the ground. Its eyes, pale and unblinking, glowed in the darkness, fixated on the fox as it crept closer. The creature was still, a predator poised to strike. For a moment, there was only silence, an eerie, unnerving quiet that pressed in on all sides. The kestrel's feathers rippled in the cool air, every instinct screaming at it to leave, to take flight and avoid whatever danger this new creature brought. But the kestrel didn't move. It remained locked in place, its eyes widening as the fox, unaware of the danger, drew nearer. Then the creature struck. In an instant, it sprang forward, its jaws snapping with terrifying speed. The fox let out a yelp, barely managing to dodge the creature's attack, but it was too late. The predator, swift as a shadow, caught the fox's tail in its jaws and yanked it back with an explosive force. The fox struggled, thrashing in an attempt to free itself, but the creature's grip was unyielding. The kestrel's heart raced as it watched the struggle unfold below. Its wings twitched, its body aching to fly, but it couldn't tear its eyes away. The creature, whatever it was, had power, raw and untamed. It moved like liquid night. The fox, bloodied and exhausted, let out one final, desperate cry as the creature tightened its grip, pulling it further into the shadows. The kestrel's chest tightened with a mix of fear and sorrow. This was a new predator in the city's wild ecosystem, and its presence was a stark reminder of the delicate balance that held this reclaimed world together. But just as quickly as it had started, the battle was over. The creature retreated back into the shadows, its form slipping away like smoke. The fox, once full of life, now lay still, its body left in the wake of the hunt. The kestrel hovered, perched high, its feathers slick with cold sweat. The air felt still again, the oppressive silence returning in the aftermath of the chase. The kestrel remained frozen for a long moment, its sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for any further threats. It could feel the weight of the moment, the knowledge that the landscape was changing in ways it could not yet understand. This new creature, this new force in the urban wilderness, had disrupted the fragile peace the kestrel had fought so hard to maintain. For the first time, the kestrel felt vulnerable. It could no longer rely solely on its speed, its agility, or its knowledge of the land. The world had shifted once again, and it wasn't clear what the future held. Slowly, cautiously, the kestrel began to retreat, its wings cutting through the air with quiet precision. It rose higher, above the crumbling buildings and forgotten alleys, above the shadows where danger lurked. The night was still and thick, and the kestrel's mind was sharp, calculating. But as it soared above the city, it couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't alone. The creature had vanished for now, but the kestrel knew better than to assume it was gone for good. The urban jungle was no longer just its domain. It was a place of uncertainty, where old rules no longer applied, and where survival depended on something more than just instinct. For the kestrel, the future was an unknown, a looming shadow in the night. And as the first light of dawn began to break over the city's skyline, the kestrel knew it would have to adapt once more, or risk being swallowed by the ever-changing landscape of the reclaimed city. The kestrel's wings beat steadily as it ascended higher, the wind pushing against its feathers with a force that almost seemed to carry a warning. The city stretched out below, a patchwork of old ruins and newer constructions, a place where nature and humanity collided in unexpected ways. It wasn't the bustling wild landscape it had once known, but it was home for now. The kestrel flew on, but its thoughts were far from the familiar flight paths it had once claimed as its own. The creature, whatever it was, lingered in its mind. It couldn't shake the image of the fox's final struggle, its body now lying motionless beneath the abandoned factory. Had it been a rival predator, seeking to claim the city's dwindling resources? Or something else entirely? An invader in a territory where the kestrel had long been the top of the food chain. The kestrel circled, scanning the urban wilderness below, its sharp eyes flicking across the landscape, noting every shift, every shadow. It had always been vigilant, but tonight, something had changed. There was a tension in the air, a sense that the land itself was holding its breath. As the Kestrel soared over the abandoned industrial sites, the dark silhouettes of old brick buildings cast long shadows against the dying light. The city hummed with a strange stillness, as if it were a waiting ground, teetering on the edge of some inevitable shift. The Kestrel's body tensed as it slowed its flight, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Then, the rustling began. It was faint at first, the tiniest of sounds, like a breath against the wind, barely audible, but impossible to ignore. The Kestrel's head snapped in the direction of the noise, eyes narrowing. Beneath the skeletal remains of a crumbling structure, it saw movement again. There, just on the edge of its vision, the glint of something slick and dark. It was the creature. The Kestrel's heart skipped a beat as it dove down silently, wings folding close to its body, its talons extended, ready for action. As it drew closer, the shape of the creature became clearer. It was still lurking, as if it had never left, its glowing eyes now fixed on something in the distance. The Kestrel slowed its descent, instinct urging it to be cautious. Softly atop a dilapidated rooftop, where a piece of broken glass glinted in the pale moonlight. The Kestrel's breath was steady, its eyes fixed on the creature, which had not yet noticed its presence. The creature's form was just as unnerving as before, with its long shadowy body and those strange pale eyes. It seemed to move in the darkness like a whisper, its every motion smooth and fluid, as if the very night belonged to it. The Kestrel could feel the shift in the air now, could sense the danger that lingered between them. But what was it after? The Kestrel's sharp senses couldn't detect any sign of the fox or any other prey. It was as if the creature was waiting for something or someone. The answer came quickly, though, when the ground beneath the Kestrel's perch trembled. A deep rumble echoed through the abandoned streets, something heavy moving beneath the earth. The Kestrel's talons dug into the crumbling surface as it looked around frantically, searching for the source of the disturbance. Then it saw it. From beneath the ruined factory emerged a procession of dark shapes, several of them crawling toward the creature. They were large, monstrous forms, their bodies twisted in unnatural ways, their eyes glowing with the same pale light as the creature's. The Kestrel's feathers bristled in sudden terror as it realized the truth. The creature wasn't alone. The ground shuddered again as the creatures, more than half a dozen now, dragged themselves toward the gathering point. The Kestrel's body quivered as it took flight once more, its mind racing. This was not just a predator. This was a colony, a group of beings that had found a way to thrive in the ruins of the city, feeding off the remnants of its forgotten past. For a moment, the Kestrel hovered above them, unsure of what to do next. The creatures were closing in around the fox's still body, their strange pale eyes glowing in unison. The Kestrel watched as they began to feast, their sharp claws digging into the earth as they tore into the fox's flesh. A chill ran through the Kestrel's veins as it realized what it was witnessing. A new era of predation, a new threat to the delicate balance of this urban wilderness. The Kestrel circled, scanning the scene below. The creatures seemed oblivious to its presence, focused solely on the carcass they were devouring. The Kestrel's instincts screamed at it to retreat, to leave before it became a target. But it couldn't, not yet. As the creatures fed, the Kestrel's sharp eyes caught something that made its blood run cold. Another fox, the sibling of the one that had fallen, creeping toward the group. Its body low to the ground, its movements silent. The Kestrel's breath caught in its chest. The fox was walking directly into the path of the predators. No, the Kestrel couldn't let it happen. It shot forward, its wings cutting through the air with purpose. The creatures had no time to react before the Kestrel dove in with a force that sent them scattering. Talons slashing through the night, the Kestrel's instincts took over. its heart pounding in its chest as it drove the creatures back with a flurry of feathers and deadly speed. But it wasn't enough. One of the creatures lashed out with surprising speed, its claws raking across the Kestrel's side. The Kestrel let out a cry of pain but didn't falter. It fought with everything it had, its sharp talons slicing through the air, keeping the creatures at bay. Then, in an instant, the fox was gone. It had vanished into the shadows, escaping into the safety of the underbrush. The Kestrel faltered, heart still racing. The creatures seemed to retreat, their movements slower now, as though satisfied for the moment. The Kestrel, wings aching, hovered high above the scene, watching as the creatures disappeared into the dark recesses of the city. For now, they had retreated, but the battle was not over. The Kestrel knew this wasn't a fight it could win alone. This was no longer just about survival. It was about understanding the new balance of power in this reclaimed city. And for the Kestrel, that meant learning how to adapt to a world that was shifting beneath its wing.